All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some fascinating new tech coming out of China.
Okay.
And looking at an article discussing how they're using airships to detect stealth aircraft.
Uh-huh.
Like the F-35,
Right.
the plane that's supposed to be invisible to radar.
Yeah.
So this should be interesting.
Definitely sounds like it.
Yeah, so this new study is making some pretty wild claims about how effective this tech is.
Yeah, they're actually suggesting that these airships can pick up an F-35 from almost 2,000 kilometers away.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
2,000 kilometers?
I know, right?
That's like spotting a fly across multiple states.
It's pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah, so, we all know the F-35. It's supposed to be like the ultimate stealth machine.
Right.
So how on earth are they seeing it from that far away?
Well, it all comes down to how the F-35 attacks stealth in the first place.
Okay.
A big part of it is this special radar-absorbing coating they use on the plane's surface.
Uh-huh.
It's designed to basically deflect radar waves so the plane doesn't show up on enemy radar screen.
So it's like bouncing the radar signals away like a mural or something?
You've got the right idea.
Okay.
It's a little more complicated than that, but the coating absorbs the radar waves and converts them into heat, effectively making the plane invisible to radar.
Oh, wow. That's seriously clever stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So, but if they're not using radar, how are the Chinese detecting these stealth planes?
Exactly. So this article hints that they're using infrared detection instead.
Okay.
So basically they're looking for the heat signature of the F-35's engine exhaust.
Oh, so even though the plane itself might be cool, the engine's still blazing hot.
Exactly.
It's like trying to hide a campfire in the middle of the night. You can cover the flames and that heat's going to give you away.
Perfect analogy.
So how hot are we talking here?
Well, the F-35's engine exhaust can reach almost 1,000 Kelvin.
1,000 Kelvin. Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent science, how hot is that?
Over 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's definitely not something you want to get close to.
No kidding.
Okay, but the key here is that the engine is much hotter than the rest of the plane, right?
Right. The F-35's airframe is designed to minimize its heat signature, but the engine is still a major source of heat.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like they've got a giant, super sensitive heat-seeking camera up in the sky.
You got it.
And these airships are floating way up high above most of the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, at around 20 kilometers.
Which means there's less interference with that heat signal.
Right, giving them a clear view of anything radiating heat below.
So it's like they're hawks circling high above, but instead of seeing light, they see heat?
Pretty much.
Okay, that's a pretty unsettling thought, especially if you're flying a stealth plane.
Definitely.
But I'm guessing there's got to be a catch, right?
Of course, no system is perfect, and this one has its weaknesses. The article mentions that the detection range varies depending on the angle.
Oh, so like if the F-35 is flying straight at the airship, it's harder to detect.
Exactly. Head-on, the range drops to around 350 kilometers. But if it's flying sideways or away from the airship, they claim they can detect it from over 1,800 kilometers.
Wow. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, it is.
So it's not foolproof then?
No, it's not. What other limitations are there?
Well, for one, these airships aren't exactly speed demons.
No, they're not. They only travel at about 120 kilometers per hour.
Which might sound fast.
Sure.
But compared to a fighter jet, it's practically a snail's pace.
Yeah, it is.
So we've got these giant blimps slowly cruising through the stratosphere, scanning for heat signatures.
Right.
It's like a high-tech game of hide and seek, but the seeker is moving in slow motion.
And not just slow, but big.
Oh, right. These airships are massive, aren't they?
Yeah, which makes them difficult to maneuver quickly and potentially easy targets for specialized interceptors.
Ah, so there's our countermove. We just need to build faster, nimbler aircraft designed to take out these slow-moving behemoths.
That's one way to look at it, but remember, this is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. China's investment in anti-stealth technology goes far beyond these airships.
Oh, right, of course. So what else are they working on?
Well, they've been developing advanced radar systems and low-orbit satellites as well.
So it's not just about a single airship, it's about creating a layered defense network.
Exactly, like a web that's getting tighter and tighter around stealth aircraft.
Wow, this is getting serious. So what does this mean for the future of aerial warfare?
Well, that's a question we'll be exploring in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm definitely hooked.
Great.
So tell me more about these other anti-stealth systems China's developing.
Let's get into it. Welcome back. So before we dive into those other systems, I think it's worth taking a closer look at how this infrared detection actually works.
Yeah, okay, I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Sure.
It's one thing to say they're looking for heat, but how do they actually pick out the F-35's heat signature from everything else?
That's a great question. The world is full of things that emit infrared radiation. The sun, the Earth itself, even us.
Right.
So the trick is to filter out all that background noise and zero in on the specific heat coming from the F-35 engine.
So it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But the needle is a heat signature, and the haystack is all the other heat in the world.
Exactly. And that's where the science gets really interesting. Remember those mercury-cadmium telluride detectors we talked about?
Yeah.
Those detectors are designed to be super sensitive to a very specific range of infrared wavelengths.
So it's not just about detecting any heat, it's about detecting the right kind of heat.
Precisely. The study focuses on the 2.8 to 4.3 micrometer wavelength range.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that. That specific range of infrared light is less affected by things like atmospheric moisture and dust.
So they're tuning their detectors to see through all the clutter in the atmosphere.
Exactly, and to pick up the kind of heat that an F-35 engine puts out.
Wow. Okay. And they're using those massive telescopes too, right?
Oh yeah, with a 300 millimeter aperture.
300 millimeters, I'm trying to picture that. That's like bigger than a dinner plate.
It's even bigger. Those large apertures are key for gathering as much of that infrared light as possible.
Even from thousands of kilometers away.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me get this straight. They've got these super sensitive detectors tuned to see a very specific kind of heat. And they've got these giant telescopes to collect as much of that heat as possible, all mounted on a platform floating way up high.
You got it.
That's incredible.
It really highlights how fast sensing technology has advanced.
It's like science fiction becoming reality.
Right.
Okay, so back to those other anti-stealth systems you mentioned. What else is China working on?
Well, one example is the JY-27A radar system.
Okay, and what's that?
It's a ground-based radar specifically designed to detect stealth aircraft.
Uh-huh.
It uses something called bistatic radar, which means it transmits and receives signals from different locations.
Wait, hold on. How does that work?
So traditional radar systems use the same antenna to both send out a signal and listen for its reflection. But stealth aircraft are designed to deflect those signals away from the source.
Okay.
With the static radar, you have the transmitter sending out a signal, and the receiver, which could be miles away, is listening for any faint reflections that bounce off the stealth aircraft.
So it's like setting a trap.
Exactly.
You're not looking for a direct hit. You're looking for those stray signals that slip through.
Precisely. It's a much trickier technique, but it can be very effective against stealth.
So we've got these heat-seeking airships up high and these sneaky radar systems on the ground.
Well, don't forget about space.
Oh, right. Space.
China's been investing heavily in its own network of low-orbit satellites.
Uh-huh.
Many of them are designed for surveillance.
And they can detect stealth aircraft, too.
They could play a key role in tracking them.
So it's not just one technology. It's about using all of these systems together.
Exactly. They're combining ground-based radar, space-based surveillance, and these new airship platforms
to create this web of detection.
That's becoming harder and harder for stealth aircraft to penetrate.
Okay, so everyone's developing this anti-stealth technology. What does that mean for the future of aerial warfare?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll be exploring in more detail in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've talked about all this anti-stealth tech that China's developing.
Right.
And it seems pretty effective.
It does.
So does that mean that stealth aircraft like the F-35 are basically becoming obsolete?
Well, it's a question a lot of people are asking,
Yeah.
and it's understandable, but I think it's more complicated than just saying stealth is dead.
Okay, so what do you mean?
Technology is always evolving. It's a constant race, a back and forth.
Okay,
As anti-stealth tech gets better, stealth tech has to adapt too.
so it's like a game of cat and a mouse.
Exactly. For every new way to detect stealth aircraft, someone's probably already working on the way to make those aircraft even harder to detect.
Okay, so what do those next-gen stealth technologies look like?
Well, one area of focus is reducing the heat signature of aircraft even further. Think as advanced engine designs, new materials that dissipate heat better, maybe even active cooling systems to mask the engine exhaust.
So basically making the plane run colder so it's harder to spot.
Exactly, like taking that campfire we talked about and making it burn much colder.
Okay, and what else?
Electronic warfare is another big area.
Electronic warfare?
Yeah, things like jamming or spoofing enemy sensors,
Uh-huh.
creating this fog of electronic interference so it's harder for them to get a clear picture.
So like creating a smokescreen but with electronics.
Exactly. Imagine a stealth aircraft that can not only deflect radar signals, but also project false targets or even create a sort of electronic invisibility cloak.
That's pretty wild.
It is.
But developing all these countermeasures, that's got to be expensive, right?
Of course, advanced tech never comes cheap. And this race to stay ahead is going to be incredibly costly.
Yeah, and it's not just about money either.
Right.
It takes some serious brain power, too.
Absolutely. Some of the best minds in the world are going to be working on this stuff.
So it's like a global arms race, but instead of weapons, they're competing with patents and scientific breakthroughs.
Exactly. And it's not just the U.S. and China either.
Oh, right.
Other countries are also investing in this tech.
Both stealth and anti-stealth.
Exactly.
Wow, so this is a pretty big deal then.
It is. And it goes beyond just the military, too. Remember we talked about how this airship tech could also be used for things like environmental monitoring or search and rescue.
Yeah.
This technology has a lot of potential application.
Both good and bad.
Right? And as it becomes more widespread, it's going to raise all sorts of ethical and societal questions.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one, there's the issue of privacy.
Uh-huh.
If we have airships and satellites constantly scanning the skies, what does that mean for our privacy?
Yeah, it's like having surveillance cameras everywhere, but now they're in the sky too.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for misuse.
Okay.
What if this tech falls into the wrong hands? Could it be used by authoritarian regimes to monitor their citizens or suppress dissent?
That's a scary thought.
It is. It seems like we're heading towards a future where the line between security and surveillance is getting blurrier and blurrier.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It
We
has.
started by talking about airships and stealth aircraft, and now we're talking about the future of warfare, global power dynamics, and even the very nature of privacy.
It's amazing how these topics can connect to such big questions.
It really is. So for everyone listening out there, keep your eyes on the skies. The future is unfolding above us, and it's full of both promise and peril. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time for another exploration of the world around us.